My church forced me to go to conversion therapy. Years later, the pastor messaged me on a gay dating app. I grew up in a small town in South Texas where the heat was scorching, the neighbors knew your name without asking, and God was everywhere. On the supermarket signs, on the radio while you had breakfast, in my mother's voice, every time she said, "God gives us trials, son, and you have to overcome them." I was 14 when I discovered those trials had a name. I was gay. I didn't say it out loud, not even to myself. I just felt it, like a fire that didn't burn but still left a mark. Lingering glances, dreaming of touching a hand I wasn't supposed to. Hearing another boy's voice and feeling different, not dirty, not broken, just different. But in my house, that was the same as having a demon inside. And in my church, that was worse than being dead. That was its name. A place with hard benches, stained glass cracked by time, and choirs so passionate it hurt not to believe in all of it. The pastor, Reverend Caleb Martin, was an imposing figure. Tall, deep voice, always with his sleeves rolled up, as if ready to scrub the filth from our souls with his bare hands. He was an idol for everyone, except me. Since I was little, I'd felt uncomfortable around him. Not because of what he said, he was a good speaker, but because of how he said it. Always so obsessed with sin, with the enemies of God, with the eternal fire reserved for soft men and their carnal pleasures. Those words haunted me, until one day, I said them myself. "Mom, I think I'm one of them." She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stood up, grabbed her Bible, and said, "Tomorrow we're going to talk to the pastor." It wasn't therapy. There was no comfy couch or a cup of tea or gentle questions. It was a room behind the altar, a windowless room, with a fan that barely spun and a chair facing a broken mirror. There, they made me pray, scream, write my sins over and over again, look at depraved images, and then kneel to ask forgiveness for having seen them. One time they locked me in there for 4 hours. No water. Another time, the Reverend brought in a converted ex-gay who told us how he used to have dirty sex with men and how now he was the father of 3 and sold Bibles. If he could do it, so can you. God doesn't make mistakes, but you can live in one. You're not gay. You're possessed by an idea. That's what Caleb told me, with his hand on my shoulder, with his eyes fixed on me. And I believed him. For 3 years, I tried not to be me. I forced myself to look at girls, to listen to Christian music that talked about purity, to wear clothes that wouldn't draw attention, to lower my gaze whenever someone more handsome than me entered the church, until my body started to fail. Insomnia, dizziness, vomiting before going to mass. One afternoon, I fainted during youth service. My mother cried. The pastor prayed over me, forcefully, as if by shouting loud enough he could expel the demon living inside me. That night, I told myself, if there is a God, he can't want me dead just to accept me alive. The next day, I packed a backpack with 2 changes of clothes, an old pocket knife, and a photo of my grandmother, the only one who ever told me God was love, not punishment, and I left. I never went back. I lived on a friend's couch for a year, got a job at a restaurant washing dishes. By 19, I could afford my own room. At 21, I started real therapy with a psychologist who didn't look at me like I needed an exorcism. At 23, I kissed someone for the first time without guilt, and I cried because I realized everything they had stolen from me. My adolescence, my sense of safety, my voice. But I also cried because, in that moment, I felt like I was being born again. I won't lie. At first, I was scared. Downloading a gay dating app was an emotional leap. My hands were sweaty. I kept thinking my mother or someone I knew would see me, that someone from church would screenshot my profile and send it to the prayer group. But I downloaded it, uploaded a neutral photo, a different name, nothing vulgar, just Luis, 26, looking for real conversation. One night, after an exhausting day, I got a notification. You've matched. At first, I didn't recognize the face. It was a photo taken from below, with dark sunglasses, and a generic name, J. Martin TX. But the message made my blood run cold. You used to go to Grace Church, right? You were always special. I didn't reply. A minute later, another message. Don't be scared. I just wanted to talk. You look great. Very free. I opened the profile, checked the gallery, and then I saw it. A tattoo on the forearm. A cross with 3 horizontal lines. The same one Reverend Caleb Martin had. The one he said was a sign of covenant with the Almighty. It couldn't be, but it was. It was him. My pastor. My therapist. The man who said I was sick. Now on the same app, looking for someone like me. 30 minutes passed. 30 minutes staring at the screen. Heart racing. Hands cold. Not knowing whether to block him, report him, scream, or just disappear again. Don't be scared. I just wanted to talk. You look great. Very free. Free. That word. It was like a stab. Because I wasn't free for years. Because it cost me internal scars. It cost me nights praying not to wake up. It cost me leaving my family. It cost me shattering into pieces the voice he shaped with fear. And now he was on a gay app saying he just wanted to talk? After 3 years locked in that windowless room, after making me cry for forgiveness over a kiss I never gave, I answered him. One single word. Caleb? It took him less than a minute. I'd prefer if you call me Martin. But yes, my stomach churned. How are you? That was the second thing he sent. As if we'd bumped into each other at a park. As if he didn't know he was the reason I couldn't look at my own reflection for almost a decade without hating myself. You look so different. At peace. I'm glad to see you like this. I don't know if what came out of me was laughter or sobs. I think both at once. I didn't reply for a week, but I didn't block him either. Not out of sick curiosity or morbid interest. I left him there because I needed to see how far he would go. I needed to know if the monster who terrorized me during my adolescence had even an ounce of shame. Spoiler. He didn't. In those days, he sent 3 more messages. I never stopped thinking about you. Sometimes I wonder if you also saw me differently. Maybe we got the place wrong. Not the person. Us, got it wrong. I was 14. He was 36. I didn't even understand my own body. He was already preaching about hell with the certainty of someone who thinks he's God. And now he was talking like we'd shared a forbidden love story. Like ours was a romantic tragedy and not a spiritual violation. I told my therapist everything. Every word. Every message. She, who had seen me tremble just from saying the word church, looked at me with that expression that was part restraint, part sorrow. You're not obligated to face anything that hurts you, he told me. But if you decide to do it with control. Don't let it drag you under. I nodded. And that night, I replied to him, not for him, for me. Because sometimes, to end something, you have to walk into the fire one last time. That was my answer. He took an hour to write back. I guess he didn't expect me to confront him like that. Of course, it was hard for both of us, wasn't it? I just wanted to help you. I felt like throwing up, because I didn't just remember the room. I remembered the echo, the sweat, the smell of confinement, the notebook where I had to write, I am not gay 100 times, the sessions with another boy who cried more than I did, and who one day simply never came back. I held on to the edge of the desk, and I kept typing. You didn't help me. You broke me. Silence for 2 hours. And then, as if he hadn't read a thing, as if he were emotionally deaf. Sometimes I dream of what could have been if we didn't have to pretend so much. Can I take you out for coffee? Coffee after destroying me. And for a second, a disgusting second, I thought about saying yes, just so I could throw it in his face. But no, I blocked him. I blocked him, closed the app, turned off my phone, and stared at the ceiling all night. For weeks I was unstable. Flashbacks. Nightmares. Dreaming about the wooden chair in that room. The sound of the door closing. My mother's voice saying, obey the pastor. He just wants what's best for you. I felt like I was 15 again. Like every step I had taken to heal was cracking under the weight of that damn message. But something changed. Because this time, I wasn't alone. I had my partner, my friends, my therapist, and I had a voice I now knew how to use. I started writing, first just for myself, then online, stories about my teenage years, about how misused faith can warp a child's life. And I got messages from others like me, who had also been locked up, who had also seen Reverend Martin. One of those messages was from someone who said they had attended the church 3 years before I did. He sent me photos, conversations, a list of names, among them Julian P., Marco L., Brandon C., and his own, Isaias M., all teenagers at the time, all boys, all sent to private sessions with Caleb. None of them lasted more than 6 months in the church, Isaias wrote. One ended up institutionalized. Another moved north. I went to live with my grandmother in another state. What he was telling me wasn't an isolated pattern. It was a system of manipulation, of guilt, and very likely, of abuse. There was no physical evidence. No formal complaints, just stories, hundreds of stories, silent, shattered, and now in my hands. One Saturday morning, I went out to buy bread and coffee. I was walking through the main square when I saw him. Caleb, not as tall anymore, not as sure of himself, wearing casual clothes, big sunglasses, and for a second, when our eyes met, I saw panic in his. He recognized me. I didn't look away. I walked past him without lowering my head, without trembling, and he stood there, still, like a broken statue in the middle of a city that no longer belongs to him. The day I saw him in the square was the same day I realized I was no longer a trapped child. That look on his face, tilting his head as if searching for a way out through the cracks in the pavement, was like seeing the monster without his mask. Human, small, uncomfortable in his own skin, just like he made me feel for years. I didn't confront him. I didn't shout. I didn't even speak to him. And yet, the weight of that moment stayed with me for days. I dreamed of him standing in that windowless room, speaking to me in that soft voice he used when he wanted you to believe his cruelty was love. I dreamed he reached out his hand, and I, by instinct, stepped back and ran through a door that hadn't been there before. I woke up gasping, my shirt stuck to my chest, the sheets wrapped around my legs like they'd tried to trap me in the night. I started to speak, out loud, not in private notes anymore, not in diaries with emotional locks. I began to tell my story, with names, with places, with dates, not from hatred, but from the wound. And it felt like pulling off a blindfold I didn't know was still there. Online, some believed me immediately. Others doubted. Many stayed silent. But the messages started coming. 1, then 5, then dozens. Many were anonymous. But some signed with full names. One of them shook me. His name was Brandon C., the same name Isaias had sent me. He told me he had also received messages from Caleb years after leaving the church. That for a while, he had considered reporting him, but his family had cut him off, and he didn't want to relive it all. He asked me not to name him, but to keep speaking. He said, if you can do it, I feel like maybe I can too someday. That broke me and held me together at the same time. But not all the messages were supportive. One in particular, left me frozen. It came from an account with no photo, no name, no followers. You're spitting on the people who fed you. And another, who do you think you are, trying to destroy a church over an unresolved crush? I ignored them. Or at least, I tried. But they hurt. Because even though logic told me these were attacks from strangers, my body still carried the shame they had instilled in me since I was a kid. That old, rotten guilt that flares up like an allergy the moment it smells judgment. I went back to therapy twice a week. My therapist told me I was reliving a form of complex trauma. Not the trauma of one event, but of an ecosystem. That was the word, ecosystem. An entire system designed to make you doubt yourself, your desires, your identity, your right to exist without asking for forgiveness. She asked if I wanted to close the chapter, to leave the story there, unanswered, not digging anymore. I told her I couldn't, that this wasn't a personal catharsis. Not anymore, that now there were names, faces, lives, that I had survived, but many still didn't know how to begin. Weeks later, in one of my posts, a woman left a comment. She said she was a former member of the church. She recognized the reverend. She told me her brother had been sent to corrective prayer sessions during his teenage years, that he never spoke about it again, that he now lived alone, had no contact with the family, and trembled every time he heard the word church. She gave me her number. She said, "If you ever want to talk, I believe you." The circle kept expanding, and with it, the weight. I started to feel afraid. Not of him. No, not anymore. But afraid of what this could trigger. There were still older people who defended him like he was a saint. People who invited him to preach in other cities. Who shared his quotes on Facebook like they were news psalms. And then, one night, I saw him again. This time it wasn't in the plaza. It was in a cafe. He was sitting at a corner table, with a laptop open, typing. He hadn't seen me. But my body recognized him. An electric jolt. The smell. The posture. The creak of the wooden chair as he shifted. Everything lit up in me as if a part of my brain, programmed to survive him, had suddenly awakened. I don't know what pushed me to do it, but I approached. He looked up, and for the first time, he spoke to me without the pastor's voice. Without the mask. Luis, my name. No embellishments. No tone of superiority. As if, for a moment, he were just a man facing something he couldn't control. "I have nothing to say to you," I said firmly. But he didn't move. Didn't deny. Didn't defend himself. He just lowered his gaze. Stayed silent. And that was worse than any excuse. Because it made it clear he knew. That he knew everything. And still, he had come back. To the same city. The same place. To sit in the same chairs. Knowing he'd left broken children in his wake. That night, I wrote like never before. Not just about him, but about me. About fear. About how sometimes liberation doesn't come as light, but as slow-burning rage. As a truth that crawls before it can stand. The next day, someone shared my post in a community group. And then the call started. People who had known me as a child. Distant aunts. Neighbors. A woman who had been my elementary school teacher sent me a message that simply said, "I remember you as brave. Now you're even more." But the most unexpected thing came a week later. I got a message from Isaias. Not a text. A voice note. I listened to it in the early morning, lying in bed, headphones in, like it was a secret confession. He told me he was ready. That he wanted to tell his story. That he didn't want to hide anymore. He told me there was more. That there was another person. A boy who had tried to take his own life at 17 after a special session. That Caleb used to visit him in secret. That there are witnesses, though all of them are afraid. And he told me something that stuck with me. You're not pulling out a story. You're pulling a corpse out of a well. Since then, I haven't stopped writing. I haven't stopped receiving messages. I haven't stopped trembling either. Because the fear doesn't leave. It settles. It watches you. But now I recognize it. I name it. I face it. 2 days ago, my mother wrote to me. The same one who took me to Caleb when I was 14. She asked if everything I was saying was true. She said she only wanted me to be saved. That she didn't understand what I was doing. I answered with another question. Would it seem the same to you if what he did to me, he had done to a girl? She didn't reply. She couldn't. The silence, this time, was all I needed. And yet, I know this isn't over. Because there's something I haven't told. 3 nights ago, I received a letter in my mailbox. No sender. Just a handwritten sheet. At the top, a phrase. "Do you really think you can destroy someone like me?" And at the bottom, a signature. CM. I won't lie. I froze. I put the letter away. Called Isaias. Read it to him. He stayed quiet for a long moment. "He's going to try to scare you," he said. "Because he knows this time, you're not alone." And I'm not. But I also know Caleb hasn't said his last word. I sat at the back of the temple. I wasn't shaking anymore, but I was still tense. I didn't know what I expected to find. I just needed to see it with my own eyes. The place. The benches. The altar. I wanted to make sure it had all been real. That I didn't imagine it. That I hadn't exaggerated. I stayed there 15 minutes. Silence. Just as I stood to leave, I heard footsteps. Soft. Purposeful. And I saw him. Caleb. He wasn't wearing a suit. Or carrying a Bible. Gray t-shirt, worn jeans, his face a little thinner. We looked at each other. He didn't say anything. He walked straight toward me, like he expected to see me there. Like he knew I'd come. "You have no right," were his first words. "To what?" "To destroy everything we built." I had to laugh. Not out of humor. Out of indignation. "Is that what we did?" Built something. You saved a lot of people in those groups. Even if you deny it now. No, Caleb. I didn't save anyone. I was trying to save myself. From you. He looked down. For a moment, he seemed human. Vulnerable. Why did you come back here? I asked him. Because I won't let this be the only story told about me. I stayed silent. I didn't know what to say. He took a deep breath, like he was struggling to hold himself together. I know I hurt you. But you're turning into something you're not, too. What am I then? A wounded man. Who only knows how to wound. The words hurt. Not because they were true, but because I knew that was his trick. To strike where it hurts the most, just when you're about to heal. I stepped closer. Just one step. Looked him in the eye. The difference between you and me, Caleb, is that I never lied about who I was. He didn't answer. We stood there in silence. And then he said, almost in a whisper, do you think you can erase all this with a couple of posts? No, Caleb. But I can make sure no one else goes through what I did. He nodded, lowered his head, and without another word, he walked away. There were no shouts, no threats, just that dry, heavy exchange, like a door that shuts and won't open again. I left the temple shortly after. Outside, the sky was overcast. I walked slowly to the bus station, sat down, waited, checked my phone. A notification from Isaias. All good. I replied, yes, I'm done. Put my phone on silent. Breathed, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Lightness, not because everything was fine, not because there was justice, not because he was paying for what he did, but because I was no longer the one carrying his guilt. That night, I went back home. I wrote the last post in my thread. It wasn't a complaint. It wasn't a cry. It was a closure. I said I had seen him, that I didn't expect anything from him, that I didn't get an apology, that I didn't need one. I said I was still in therapy, that I had good days and some horrible ones. But above all, I said I was here, alive, clear-headed, whole, and that if someone else read my words and saw themselves in them, then it had all been worth it. I turned off my phone, and for the first time in a long while, I slept, without locking the door with a double bolt, without checking the curtains, without fear of the ghosts from the past, not because they were gone, but because they no longer had power over me. Weeks passed since I last saw him. Sometimes, people talk about closure as if it were a slammed door, a sharp decision, but no one warns you that, even after closing the door, you can still hear footsteps on the other side. The night after my encounter with Caleb, I dreamed about him. Not in nightmares, not like before. Just him, watching me, looking at me with that mix of defeat and pride that froze my blood in the church. In the dream, he asked me, what if I wasn't the only one? I woke up with my heart racing. I spent the whole day asking myself that. What if he wasn't? It's not that I cared about his reputation. What unsettled me was thinking about the others. The ones still there. The ones who stay silent. The ones who feel dirty for desiring something the pastor himself taught them to hate. I began to notice things. Small details in my direct messages. People writing from new accounts, with generic names, saying, thank you for sharing. Something happened to me too, with him. I didn't reply at first. Part of me feared it was cruel jokes. People playing with my story. But then one of those people, a boy who called himself Ben, wrote to me. I went to the youth group for 5 years. He always made me stay after prayer. He said it was so we could talk about my purity. I was 15. I didn't sleep that night. Ben didn't want to report him. He wasn't looking for revenge. He just wanted someone to listen. And that broke me, because I had been that boy too. I became obsessed with the thread. Not with mine, but with theirs. I started saving screenshots, comparing dates, names. Not to expose, just to understand. To know if what I felt was real. If it was justified. If I wasn't the only one who came out of there with an open wound and a Bible in my pocket. But one day, Isaiah stopped me. Are you okay? Yes. I'm just reading. You haven't gone outside in 3 days. You haven't eaten well. You're getting obsessed again. It's not obsession. It's justice. And your peace? Where are you leaving it? I didn't know what to say. The worst part is, he was right. There was something in me that didn't know how to let go. As if, from carrying that story so long, it had fused with my identity. Who was I, if not the survivor of Pastor Caleb? That question shook me more than anything else. I went back to therapy. I told my psychologist everything. The posts, the messages, the conversation in the church. She listened silently, without taking notes. And then she said something that still echoes. There comes a point where healing stops being a process and becomes an excuse to keep digging into pain. It hurt, but I understood, and I decided to take a break. I archived the thread. I wrote a final note. Thank you for reading me. Thank you for believing me. I'm taking some time to breathe. I'm not leaving. I just need to remember that I also have the right to be happy, not just to survive. There was no applause, no hate, just silence. And for the first time, I felt free, or so I thought. A month later, Isaiah and I went to an art fair in a nearby neighborhood. We were in a small gallery when I saw someone familiar. It wasn't Caleb. It was his nephew, Marcus. He was my age, maybe a bit older, but I remembered him from the youth group. Always quiet, always behind his uncle, like a shadow that never had a voice. He looked straight at me, didn't smile, didn't come closer. He just murmured something as he walked past me. There are more things you don't know. I turned around, but he had already vanished into the crowd. I didn't see him again that day, or after. I didn't look for meanings. I didn't open threads. I didn't make theories. I just sat on a bench next to Isaiah and closed my eyes. But his words followed me for days. Like an echo, there are more things you don't know. And not because I cared about the scandal. Not out of morbid curiosity, but because, what if those things are other people? What if someone right now is sitting in a group like that, convincing themselves they're sick, when all they're doing is loving badly in the wrong place? I don't know if I'll write more. I don't know if I'll return to that thread. But I know one thing. Silence protects those who abuse power. And even if I'm no longer there, I don't want to be part of that silence. Not again.